The studio lights were warm, almost forgiving, casting a soft glow across the polished floor as Kamala Harris stepped onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage. The applause rolled in waves, loud and sustained, the kind reserved for familiar faces who carried history with them. Kamala acknowledged the crowd with an easy smile, waving briefly before taking her seat. Jimmy rose to greet her, offering a practiced hug and a joke about how surreal it felt to host someone who had spent years at the center of global headlines. The audience laughed, and for a moment the atmosphere felt light, even celebratory. They began with safe ground. Jimmy teased her about late-night cravings on the campaign trail, and Kamala laughed, sharing an anecdote about stopping at a roadside diner well past midnight. The band chimed in, the audience chuckled, and the rhythm of a typical late-night interview settled in. She spoke smoothly, confidently, her voice calm and measured, as if nothing could rattle her. Jimmy nodded along, tossing in jokes, letting her stories breathe. From the outside, it looked like another polished appearance, one more stop on a carefully planned media circuit. But then the conversation shifted. Jimmy leaned forward slightly, cards in hand, his tone still playful but edged with something sharper. He referenced a recent controversy, one that had dominated cable news for weeks. The question wasn't hostile, but it was direct, framed less like a joke and more like a challenge. The laughter in the audience thinned, replaced by a low murmur of anticipation. Kamala's smile didn't vanish, but it changed. It tightened, becoming more controlled, more deliberate. She answered carefully at first, choosing her words with precision. Her response was thoughtful, layered, and clearly practiced, but Jimmy followed up almost immediately. This time, he pressed harder, pointing out a contradiction that critics had seized upon. A ripple passed through the crowd. Some leaned forward in their seats, others glanced at each other, sensing the shift. The band stayed quiet. Kamala paused. It wasn't long, just a heartbeat, but it felt like an eternity under the lights. When she spoke again, her voice carried a firmer edge. She corrected Jimmy on a detail, then expanded on her position, emphasizing context and nuance. Her tone wasn't angry, but it was unmistakably serious. Jimmy smiled, half joking, trying to steer the conversation back toward humor, but the moment resisted him. He tried again, framing the issue as something people at home are wondering. The audience laughed nervously. Kamala's eyes locked onto Jimmy's, steady and unblinking. She pushed back, not with sarcasm, but with authority. She spoke about responsibility, about the weight of decisions made behind closed doors, about how easy it was to simplify complex realities for entertainment. Each sentence landed with quiet force. The laughter stopped completely. A tension settled over the room, thick and palpable. The cameras kept rolling, catching every subtle shift in expression. Jimmy shifted in his chair, glancing briefly toward the band as if considering a musical cue, then back to Kamala. He attempted a joke, something self-deprecating, meant to break the ice, but it fell flat, dissolving into silence before it reached the back row. Kamala inhaled slowly. When she spoke, her words were calm but unmistakably pointed. She reminded him, and the audience, that some topics weren't punchlines, that accountability wasn't a prop for ratings. A faint gasp rippled through the crowd. Somewhere off camera, a producer raised a hand, signaling uncertainty. Jimmy nodded, his smile frozen, and tried to respond, but Kamala continued, not raising her voice, not interrupting, simply holding the floor with a presence that demanded attention. She spoke about respect, mutual respect, and about the line between questioning and provocation. The room felt smaller, the lights hotter. Even the applause sign felt irrelevant now. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Jimmy might regain control. He thanked her for the honesty, his tone more subdued, and attempted to pivot to another topic. But the momentum had already shifted. Kamala tilted her head slightly, considering him, then spoke again, delivering a final line that was neither loud nor dramatic, but firm enough to draw another audible reaction from the audience. The band didn't play. The cameras lingered. Jimmy opened his mouth, then closed it. He nodded slowly, clearly weighing his options. A producer's voice crackled faintly through his earpiece. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and undeniable. Finally, Jimmy announced they were going to take a quick break, his voice lighter than his expression suggested. But Kamala didn't wait. She placed her hands on the arms of the chair and stood. The movement was smooth, deliberate, unhurried. She adjusted her jacket, turned toward the audience, and offered a brief, composed nod, half acknowledgement, half farewell. A few people clapped instinctively, unsure whether they were supposed to. Others remained still, stunned. Kamala glanced once more at Jimmy, her expression unreadable, then walked off the stage. No doors slammed, no words were exchanged, just the quiet sound of her heels against the floor as she disappeared behind the curtain, leaving behind a room full of unanswered questions and a late-night host staring into the space she'd just vacated. Backstage, the energy was nothing like the polished calm of the studio. The moment Kamala disappeared behind the curtain, the controlled chaos of live television took over. Producers rushed toward one another, headsets crackling with overlapping instructions. A stage manager whispered urgently into a walkie-talkie, while a junior staffer stood frozen near the monitors, replaying the last 30 seconds on a loop as if trying to understand how the night had slipped so far off script. Kamala moved through the corridor with steady steps, her posture upright, her expression composed. An aide caught up to her, speaking softly, asking if she was all right, suggesting they pause for a moment. Kamala nodded but didn't stop. Her calm was not performative, it was resolute, the kind that came from making a decision and refusing to second-guess it. When they reached a quieter corner near the exit, she finally exhaled, the tension easing just slightly from her shoulders. Inside the studio, the commercial break felt longer than usual. Jimmy sat alone at his desk, hands folded, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the camera. The audience shifted uncomfortably, murmuring to one another in low voices. Some clutched their phones, already typing reactions, while others simply stared at the empty chair where Kamala had been moments earlier. The band waited for a cue that never came. When the show returned from break, Jimmy attempted to regain his familiar rhythm. He addressed the audience carefully, acknowledging that the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. His words were measured, almost cautious, as he spoke about the importance of open dialogue and respect. The applause that followed was polite but restrained, lacking its usual warmth. The moment lingered, heavy and unresolved. Outside, Kamala's motorcade was already waiting. As she stepped into the cool night air, flashes from cameras lit up the sidewalk. Reporters shouted questions, voices overlapping, each one trying to capture the first sound bite. Kamala paused briefly, turning toward them. She didn't comment on the exchange directly. Instead, she spoke about the importance of meaningful conversations and knowing when to step away from ones that no longer served that purpose. Then she entered the car, the door closing softly behind her. By the time the vehicle pulled away, the internet was already ablaze. Clips of the exchange spread at lightning speed, cropped, captioned, analyzed from every possible angle. Some praised Kamala's composure, calling it a powerful stand against what they saw as trivialization. Others criticized her, accusing her of walking out to avoid scrutiny. Hashtags trended within minutes, each one telling a different version of the same story. Jimmy's show ended, but the night was far from over for him. In his office, he watched the footage again, this time without the pressure of live television. The jokes that hadn't landed felt sharper now, the pauses more pronounced. He rubbed his temples, replaying the moment when the room had turned against itself. It wasn't anger he felt so much as unease, the realization that something had been crossed, even if he couldn't yet articulate exactly what. Producers debated their next move. Some argued for a statement, others for silence. The network's legal team weighed in, advising caution. Meanwhile, late-night hosts across the country were already rewriting monologues, sensing a moment that would dominate conversations for days. The exchange had become more than an awkward interview, it was a cultural flashpoint. The next morning, headlines told competing stories. Some framed it as a bold exit, others as a breakdown in civility. Pundits filled panels, dissecting body language and tone, assigning motives with confident certainty. Every pause, every word, was scrutinized. The audience reaction became a subject of debate in itself. Was the silence support, shock, or discomfort? Kamala spent the day in meetings, the incident addressed but not dwelled upon. To her team, she was clear. The decision to leave wasn't about avoiding tough questions, but about refusing to let serious issues be reduced to spectacle. She spoke calmly, firmly, and then moved on to the next item on the agenda. For her, the moment had passed, even as it continued to echo elsewhere. Jimmy, on the other hand, couldn't escape it. Late-night television thrived on moments, but this one resisted easy framing. When he addressed it again on air days later, his tone was reflective. He spoke about the challenges of balancing humor with gravity, about learning where lines truly were. It wasn't an apology in the traditional sense, but it was an acknowledgement, an admission that not every exchange fit neatly into the format. Weeks later, the incident had settled into pop culture memory, referenced in articles and retrospectives, debated in classrooms and online forums. Some saw it as a necessary disruption, a reminder that even entertainment spaces carried responsibility. Others viewed it as a cautionary tale about how quickly dialogue could unravel under pressure. Yet for all the noise, what lingered most was the image itself: a brightly lit stage, an empty chair, and the quiet echo of footsteps fading behind a curtain. It was a reminder that live television, for all its rehearsals and safeguards, could still produce moments that felt raw and uncontrollable. Moments where control slipped, and something honest, uncomfortable, unresolved, was left behind. In the end, no official verdict was ever reached on who was right or wrong. The exchange resisted closure, existing instead as a mirror, reflecting whatever each viewer brought to it. And long after the trending hashtags faded, the moment endured as a testament to how quickly a night meant for laughs could turn into a defining conversation about power, respect, and the choice to walk away.